Over the course of One Piece, there have been a handful of truly terrible moments. Now, I don't mean terrible like tragic events like the death of Ace at Marineford, or the separation of the Straw Hats, or even the funeral of the Going Merry, because all of these things destroyed me on an emotional level. When I say terrible moments in One Piece, I'm referring to genuinely awful ones. Instances that are bad, poorly executed, nonsensical, narratively ineffective, emotionally forgettable, and developmentally contradictory. One Piece is far from perfect, and I could spend hours dissecting the flaws within the story. Now, this is to be expected from any series. If you think that your favorite show is free from flaws, then you're delusional. As much as I love One Piece, I think that it's important to critique it where necessary. For every top tier, excellent, high quality moment within the story, there are plenty that fall on the opposite end of the spectrum. These are moments that are either instantly forgettable or so bad that you wish that you could forget them. The focus of this video is going to be on one moment that stands out to me as the worst in the entire series. This is what actually comes to mind immediately when someone asks about One Piece's flaws. I'm of course talking about the fight between Luffy and Zoro during the Whiskey Peak arc. In this video, I'm going to review this fight in its entirety, and I'll analyze the build-up, the execution, the narrative implications or lack thereof, and the stain that this fight has left upon the series. Also, I'm going to explore how Oda has improved upon this concept not just once, but twice later on in the series. Zoro vs Luffy happens during the Whiskey Peak arc, and it marks the Straw Hats' first full venture into the Grand Line, and this is after they enter it during the Reverse Mountain arc. Here they finally encounter the legendary conditions that the Grand Line is known for, with its ever-changing weather, tides, currents, and sea patterns which constantly keep the Straw Hats on the edge. The crew eventually navigate their way to their first island, Cactus Island, and its only town, Whiskey Peak. Navigation within the Grand Line requires a log pose, which needs time to self-calibrate upon arrival at any island. As they make their way to the docks, they are greeted by the town's leader, who warmly welcomes them and throws a grand party in their honor. After a night of celebration filled with dancing, eating, and drinking, the crew falls asleep, and it is then revealed that the entire population of Whiskey Peak is composed of bounty hunters working for the Baroque Works organization. Some of the most powerful and notorious agents include Mr. 5, Mr. 8, Mr. 9, Miss Monday, Miss Wednesday, and Miss Valentine, all of whom appeared to be present. This party was a trap, and it was intended to lure the Straw Hats into a false sense of security, making it easier for the bounty hunters to capture them. As the town prepares to strike, it is revealed that both Nami and Zoro had only pretended to fall asleep and had remained vigilant, anticipating an attack. Zoro quickly dispatches all of the unnamed bounty hunters attempting to take him down, and he easily overcomes Mr. 8, Mr. 9, Miss Monday, and Miss Wednesday. At this point, Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine arrive, revealing that they are not here to help eliminate the Straw Hats, but to deal with spies within Baroque Works. Mr. 8 and Miss Wednesday are revealed to actually be Igaram and Princess Vivi from the Alabasta Kingdom. Through some negotiations, Nami persuades Zoro to save Vivi, hinting at a potential reward of 1 billion berries from the Alabasta Kingdom. Zoro agrees, and he blocks Mr. 5's attack, clearly signaling to the pair of agents that he will be opposing them. But just then, Luffy arrives on the scene, and Zoro jokes that he doesn't need help unless Luffy also owes a favor to Vivi. Now, this banter sets the stage for the fight between Zoro and Luffy to begin. Now, you may be confused because I haven't mentioned any reason for Luffy and Zoro to fight during the Whiskey Peak summary. If you're confused, then it's intentional, because at the end of a chapter, Luffy suddenly yells at Zoro to fight him, which confuses both the audience and Zoro. This is designed as a hook or a cliffhanger to make you eager for the next chapter, where everything else will be explained. During Zoro's fight against Baroque Works, we see Luffy doing minor things in the background. At one point, Miss Wednesday uses him as a hostage and a shield, although Luffy remains asleep throughout the entire ordeal. Later, he is seen sleepily wandering around town before letting out a shocked exclamation, and the next time that we see him, he is demanding to fight Zoro. At the start of the next chapter, we learn about what Luffy had seen which had sparked this conflict. He had come across the bounty hunters which Zoro had defeated. Luffy is still under the impression that the townspeople were their friends who had just thrown them a party, so he is shocked that Zoro has defeated them. When he asks him who had done this, Zoro admits that it was him. This is actually a reasonable misunderstanding. Luffy wasn't awake to see the bounty hunters attack, and without any context, it seems like Zoro had harmed the people who had been kind to them. You'd think that this is easily resolved by a quick conversation with Zoro, but it isn't. Zoro tries to explain that the townspeople were actually enemies, but Luffy attacks him before he can finish his sentence. Zoro, feeling the power behind Luffy's blow, even asks if Luffy is trying to kill him, to which Luffy responds, "Yeah, die." Zoro tries to explain again, but Luffy interrupts, and this allows Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine to continue their attack on Vivi, who runs away. A back and forth battle ensues between Luffy and Zoro, with intermittent interruptions from Miss 5 and Miss Valentine. The pair keep attacking Luffy and Zoro when they inadvertently prevent them from getting to Vivi. The battle then kind of calms down briefly when Luffy knocks out Mr. 5 after being flung away by Zoro. Zoro finally gets the chance to explain everything to Luffy, that the townspeople were actually bounty hunters and their enemies, and you think that now the misunderstanding is solved, right? Well, not quite, because Luffy, despite hearing Zoro's perfectly reasonable explanation, begins to call Zoro a liar, as he argues that if the townspeople were enemies, then they would never have fed the crew. Realizing that Luffy isn't going to listen to reason, Zoro decides to take the fight seriously, prompting Vivi to question if they are truly crewmates. The fight intensifies, with Zoro noting that this is a good opportunity to see who is stronger, whether if Luffy's unarmed combat can beat Zoro's sword skills. Luffy agrees to the challenge, and remember this comment because it will be important later on, as the fight continues with Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine trying to interrupt again. This time both Luffy and Zoro knock them out with a single blow as they prepare to restart their fight. Nami then appears and punches them both to the ground, ending the fight. With the fight over and Nami's command to settle down, Luffy finally listens to and understands Zoro's explanation. He even says Zoro should have just explained everything earlier. There are multiple reasons as to why I believe that this is the worst fight in One Piece, and some of these reasons may already be evident from the breakdown that I've given. The most significant offense is how it completely contradicts everything that we have come to know about Luffy over the preceding 100 or so chapters. Luffy's behavior seems forced and very out of character, and the methods used to make him act this way are lazy and poorly executed. The main issue that I have is the narrative inconsistency related to Luffy's character. Luffy's love for his crew is a constant theme throughout One Piece. He declares war on the world government to save Robin. He challenges Big Mom to rescue Sanji. He fights the Frankie family to avenge Usopp, and he takes down Arlong to rescue Nami. The Arlong Park arc is the most relevant comparison to this fight. The events there occur just a few weeks before Whiskey Peak, and while I won't provide a full breakdown of Arlong Park, a summary is necessary. Nami had joined the Straw Hats shortly after Zoro, and she never had seen herself as part of the crew. During the clash with Don Creek at the Baratie, Nami steals the Going Merry along with all of the treasure that they have amassed as she returns to Arlong, revealing that she has always been a part of his crew. The Straw Hats then follow her to Arlong Park, where they find her, and after a brief confrontation, Nami appears to stab Usopp, seemingly killing him, as she then dismisses Luffy and the crew. We learn that Nami was forced to serve under Arlong's crew after they had killed her mother. She was trying to amass enough treasure to free her town. She had pretended to kill Usopp in order to make the Straw Hats abandon her, hoping to protect them from Arlong. Despite all of this, Luffy never doubted Nami and never lost faith in her. His unwavering belief had led Nami to confide in him, revealing her true motives and her desire to free herself from Arlong. After Luffy had helped her, she had joined the Straw Hats properly as the world's greatest navigator and somebody who fiercely believes in Luffy's dream of becoming the king of the pirates. Luffy's unyielding loyalty is one of the most appealing traits about him. It makes him a beloved main character. This faith and loyalty were completely disregarded within the Whiskey Peak arc, where Luffy had assumed the worst from one of his oldest crewmates in favor of people that he had known for only a few hours. This was was a complete contradiction of the previously established narrative, and the way that Luffy is written here isn't carried forward in the later parts of the series. If this aspect of Luffy's character had been developed with more nuance, then it could have added depth to the fight between Luffy and Zoro. For example, this battle between the two of them could have shown how Luffy's trusting nature can be manipulated against him. However, this would have been difficult to execute convincingly, especially given the strong example of Luffy's unwavering faith in Nami, where he didn't even question her during the Arlong Park arc. In the end, it was better to ignore the implications of Luffy's fight with Zoro and to just focus on his loyalty, which is a cornerstone of his character. Now, there have been several theories about why Oda chose to depict this fight in the way that he did. One main reason is that he might not have wanted this fight to happen in the first place. Despite being over 100 chapters in, One Piece was still relatively new and had yet to become the colossal series that it is today. It's possible that editors or higher-ups at Weekly Shonen Jump had convinced or even persuaded Oda to create a conflict between Luffy and Zoro. From an executive standpoint, this decision might seem justifiable, as Luffy and Zoro were and still are the most popular characters in One Piece, consistently ranking first and second in the popularity polls. They often fought alongside each other rather than against each other, and at this early stage in the series, Luffy didn't have a consistent rival character that was very popular. The dynamic of two main characters acting as rivals rather than direct enemies was popularized by series like Dragon Ball with Goku and Vegeta, and this trend had continued with the success of pairings such as Yusuke and Hiei from Yu Yu Hakusho, Gon and Killua from Hunter x Hunter, and most notably the rivalry of Naruto and Sasuke. These rivalries often involve characters with conflicting combat styles, as the characters push each other to become stronger while providing ongoing sources of disagreement and low-stakes conflict. Remember that line from earlier where Zoro tells Luffy that they finally have a chance to see whose combat skills are superior? This classic setup for a rivalry might have seemed appealing to executives, as it was a formula that audiences enjoyed in other stories. However, this dynamic doesn't work within the context of One Piece, at least not within the Straw Hats. The captain of a crew is the leading authority, and ultimately the crew must comply with his decisions. Zoro himself addresses this during Luffy's fight with Usopp, refusing to let Luffy forgive Usopp because it would undermine his credibility as a captain. Zoro tells Luffy this is the weight of responsibility that comes with being captain. This responsibility doesn't allow for Luffy's behavior in Whiskey Peak, where he had sided with outsiders based on limited information and he had refused to listen to or believe his first mate. Luffy's action had no basis here and no justification, and worst of all, there were no consequences for it. This conflict was simply played off as a joke and then never acknowledged again. I believe Oda himself recognized the flaws in this fight, and we only need to look at future events to see why. Luffy fights a member of his crew on two other occasions. He battles against Usopp in Water 7 and against Sanji in the Whole Cake Island arc. The fight with Sanji is more about Luffy's unwavering faith in his crew. Luffy stubbornly refuses to fight back against Sanji, making the conflict more ideological than physical. In rejecting the premise of fighting Sanji, Luffy demonstrates his loyalty, paralleling his actions towards Nami during the Arlong Park arc. The fight against Usopp, however, is different. This conflict between Luffy and Usopp has understandable build-up, high emotional stakes, and justifiable reasoning from both parties. Usopp's attachment to the Going Merry is deeply personal, as it was a gift from his childhood sweetheart, given in gratitude for saving his island. However, the Going Merry is damaged beyond repair and unsafe to sail, thus making continued use of it a potential death sentence. Luffy, saddened by this reality, declares that they will purchase a new ship instead of attempting to repair the Merry. Emotions run high, with Usopp feeling that Luffy has abandoned the Going Merry, and this sentiment amplifies Usopp's insecurities about his own strength and his fear that Luffy might abandon him as well. Luffy, on the other hand, has to consider what is best for the entire crew. The tensions escalate until fists are thrown, and Usopp challenges Luffy to a fight over the ownership of the Going Merry. Luffy accepts the offer, and the build-up feels natural here, and it's consistent with the characters of both Usopp and Luffy, and honestly there is no comparison between this and the manufactured conflict between Luffy and Zoro. One fight could have easily been avoided while the other Oda was almost unavoidable. Analyzing the fight itself will be saved for another video, but the mechanics and emotional beats of it are masterfully executed, as you would expect from the peaks of the One Piece story. This video is more negative than anything I usually make regarding One Piece, so I feel like at the very least I should point out that the art at least was very good throughout the fight between Luffy and Usopp, with well choreographed action scenes and decent comedy interplayed with the combat. The fight itself isn't bad to look at, and it contains many of the same strengths that categorize the early arcs of One Piece. The main issue that I have is everything else surrounding this conflict. Now we've reached the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. Let me know your thoughts about this fight in the comments. Were there any other fights within One Piece that are worse than this one? And did you dislike this fight as much as I did? I'd love to read all of your thoughts, so definitely continue the discussion. And lastly, thank you for making it to the end of this video, and I can't wait to see you in my next One Piece Explained video.
If you enjoy my content, then you can support my channel through Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or even through YouTube by becoming a channel member. You will gain access to exclusive channel perks and a Discord server which I frequently use. So become a member of my Zero Division and be the first to know about my upcoming videos. And once again, thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.